Picture this. You're walking down the street munching on a delicious apple and suddenly you're arrested. Your crime? Not being married. Sounds absurd, right? But for a brief period in medieval France, it was a genuine, albeit bizarre, law. It makes you wonder, what were they thinking? Throughout history, societies have been governed by rules, some sensible, some strange, and some downright laughable. These laws, etched into the annals of time, aren't just quirky footnotes. They are windows into the minds of our ancestors, reflecting their fears, their beliefs, and their often peculiar sense of order. Today, we're peeling back the layers of time to unearth some of the most bizarre laws ever enacted. From fashion police in ancient Rome to legislated bedtime in England, prepare to have your idea of normal completely redefined. Let's start our journey in ancient Greece, the cradle of democracy and philosophy. You'd think a society that gave us Plato and Socrates would be the epitome of logic. Well, think again. In the city-state of Sparta, famed for its military prowess, it was illegal for a man to be single. If you weren't married by a certain age, you were publicly shamed. During certain festivals, bachelors were forced to parade naked in the winter, singing songs about how they deserved their punishment for disobeying the law. The goal was to pressure men into marrying and producing more future soldiers for the state. Imagine your dating life being a matter of national security. It wasn't about love. It was about duty, and the state wasn't afraid to use a little public humiliation to get its way. Now let's fast forward to ancient Rome. The Romans were master builders and lawmakers, creating a legal framework that influences us to this day. But they also had a serious obsession with purple. The color purple, derived from a rare sea snail, was incredibly expensive to produce. As a result, it became the ultimate status symbol. Emperor Nero took this to the extreme, passing a law that made it a capital offense for anyone other than the emperor himself to wear a toga of Tyrian purple. If you were caught sporting the forbidden hue, you could literally be put to death. It was the ultimate act of fashion gatekeeping, ensuring that no one could outshine the emperor. Imagine a world where your choice of shirt color could be a life or death decision. This wasn't just about style, it was a powerful, visual reminder of the absolute power of the emperor. Speaking of fashion, let's jump to 14th century England. King Edward III was deeply concerned about social climbing. He wanted to make sure you could tell a nobleman from a commoner just by looking at them. So, he enacted the Sumptuary Laws of 1363. These laws were incredibly specific, dictating what people of different social classes could wear, and even what they could eat. For example, only the royal family and a handful of top-ranking nobles were allowed to wear cloth of gold. A knight's wife couldn't wear a veil that cost more than 12 pence. And a farmer? He'd better not be caught wearing any silk or ermine fur. The laws even regulated the number of courses you could have for a meal, depending on your social rank. The intention was to maintain the social order, but in reality the laws were nearly impossible to enforce and were mostly ignored by the growing and wealthy merchant class who could afford the finer things in life. But not all strange laws were about status. Some were born from pure, unadulterated superstition. In medieval Scotland, a peculiar law was passed in 1424 by King James III. It declared it illegal to go sorning, which essentially meant to wander around demanding free food and lodging. But here's the twist. The law made a specific exception for minstrels and bards. As long as they offered a song or a story in exchange for hospitality, they were welcome. However, the law had a much darker side. It was often used to persecute those loco believed to be witches or vagrants. If a person was accused of sorning without the excuse of being a performer, it could be seen as evidence of malevolent intent, tying into the widespread fear of witchcraft and dark magic. It shows how law and folklore could become dangerously intertwined. Let's head across the pond to colonial America, a land of new beginnings and really strange rules. In 17th century Massachusetts, the Puritan leaders had a very strict moral code. They famously banned Christmas celebrations, viewing them as pagan and too indulgent. For nearly 25 years, celebrating Christmas could land you a hefty fine. Can you imagine getting fined for singing a Christmas carol? But that's not all. They also had a law against wearing excessive clothing. This included things like lace, gold buttons, and elaborate ruffles. The idea was to promote modesty and simplicity, but it was really another form of social control, ensuring that no one appeared too worldly or vain. These laws paint a picture of a society deeply anxious about moral purity and determined to legislate it. Now for one of the most famously absurd laws in history, which comes from 19th century Britain. During a time of political tension with France, the British Parliament passed the Treason Felony Act of 1848. Much of it dealt with serious threats against the crown. But one small, almost comical clause made it illegal to place in any post office a postage stamp bearing the monarch's head upside down. This was considered an act of treason. While it's highly unlikely anyone was ever seriously prosecuted for this, the law technically remains on the books today, though it's now seen as a historical curiosity. It's a prime example of how laws, born out of a specific moment of panic or patriotism, can persist long after their original context has vanished, becoming a fossil in the legal system. And what about laws that seem to defy common sense? In 16th century England, a law was passed requiring everyone over the age of 6, except for nobles, to wear a woolen cap on Sundays and holidays. The penalty for not doing so was a fine of 3 farthings. Was this a law to ensure everyone's head stayed warm? Not at all. The real reason was purely economic. The English wool industry was struggling, and this law was a creative, if forceful, attempt to boost demand for woolen goods. It was a government-mandated stimulus package in the form of a hat. This law shows how governments have always used legal means to prop up key industries, sometimes in the most personal and intrusive ways. Let's travel to the 20th century. You might think we'd have outgrown such oddities, but you'd be wrong. In the town of Pocatello, Idaho, an ordinance was passed in 1912 that made it illegal to frown, scowl, or otherwise appear unhappy in public. The law was part of a Smile Ordinance campaign initiated by the mayor to promote a more cheerful and attractive city image. The law stated that it was illegal for anyone to walk around the city with a sour expression on their face. While it was more of a publicity stunt than a seriously enforced law, it technically remained in the city's legal code for decades. It's a funny reminder that even in modern times, local governments can sometimes get a little carried away with their desire to create the perfect community. These laws, from the deadly serious to the hilariously absurd, are more than just historical trivia. They are a mirror reflecting the societies that created them. They show us what people valued, what they feared, and how they tried to impose order on a chaotic world. They reveal the anxieties about social status, the deep-seated superstitions, and the sometimes clumsy attempts to control the economy and public morality. While we can laugh at the idea of being arrested for not smiling or for wearing the wrong color, these laws also serve as a cautionary tale. They remind us that the line between order and absurdity can be incredibly thin, and that laws are only as wise as the people who write them. So the next time you think a modern rule is a bit strange, just remember your historical counterparts. At least you can wear a purple shirt without risking your life and eat your dinner without consulting a legal document. History is full of these strange and wonderful stories, and each one gives us a clearer picture of the incredible and often bizarre human journey. Thanks for journeying back in time with us. If you enjoyed this dive into the weird world of historical laws, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into the past. Drop a comment below with the most bizarre law you've ever heard of. We'd love to hear it. See you next time.